My name is Layla Brennan, and I am 34 years old. 3 weeks ago, my aunt accidentally forwarded me a voice message instead of deleting it. A clip from a family dinner I had skipped because I was finishing a quarterly report for one of my biggest clients. I hit play expecting maybe a wrong number or someone asking about leftovers. What I heard instead stopped my breath completely. My own brother mocking me in front of the whole table, doing this little impression of me carrying my laptop everywhere, and my mother laughing the way she only laughs when she is fully relaxed and completely certain nobody outside that room is listening. For 6 years, I had quietly been the reason this family stayed financially above water. And in about 40 seconds of accidental audio, I finally understood exactly what that had cost me, and exactly what none of them had ever thought it was worth. I want you to stay with me here, because this is not a story about revenge. It is a story about a woman who spent 6 years quietly loving people through her bank account, never once asking to be celebrated for it, and then one night heard herself described like a joke at a dinner table she was not even sitting at. And the thing that surprised me most was not the anger. It was how calm I felt, how clear everything suddenly became, like a window you did not realize was foggy until someone finally wiped it clean. I work in supply chain logistics. I coordinate inventory movement for mid-sized retail companies, the kind of job most people do not fully understand when you explain it at family gatherings, so eventually you stop explaining and just say you work in business. I am organized, detail-oriented, good under pressure, and I have always been the kind of person who handles things without needing to announce that she's handling them. That last quality, the one I was always quietly proud of, turned out to be the exact quality my family decided to treat as an unlimited resource with no expiration date. It started when my father lost his job 6 years ago. He was 58, experienced in a field that was slowly being automated out from under him, and the gap between his last paycheck and his first unemployment check landed on our family like a stone dropped from a roof. My mother had part-time income, but nothing close to covering their mortgage. My brother Derek was 27, working construction, supporting his girlfriend and her daughter. Stretched so thin he was already borrowing against next month before this month was half done. My younger sister Priya was finishing her second year of college and could barely cover her own books. I was 28, 2 years into my career, with a real salary and enough savings to actually absorb a blow. So I absorbed it, quietly, the way you do when you are the only one standing close enough to catch something before it hits the floor. I covered my parents' mortgage gap for 4 months while my father found contract work. I co-signed Derek's car refinance so his interest rate dropped to something survivable. I sent Priya grocery money twice a month and told her to focus on her classes. None of it felt like sacrifice at the time because I genuinely believed it was temporary, and I genuinely believed that what I was doing was simply what you do when you are the one who can. I believed that. I really did. For a long time. Temporary does not announce itself when it becomes permanent. It just keeps showing up on the first of the month like a bill you forgot you were still paying. My father found contract work, but the rates were lower than before, so their budget never fully recovered. Derek's girlfriend had a medical situation and he quietly started leaning on me for grocery runs. Priya graduated but moved back home instead of out, and somehow my parents' expenses went up instead of down. Every time I considered raising the subject, something new arrived. A car repair, a medical bill, a school fee. A situation that felt too urgent to push back on and too personal to negotiate around. And every time I swallowed the question and just handled it, I told myself I was being loving. I told myself gratitude did not always need to be spoken out loud to be real. The voice message my aunt accidentally forwarded me was from a Sunday dinner 3 weeks ago. The one I had skipped because a client's quarterly numbers were due Monday morning, and I could not afford to lose the Sunday. There was music playing softly in the background and the sound of dishes being cleared, and then my brother's voice cutting through it all doing this little performance for the table. "Layla never comes anyway," he said, his voice doing that half-laugh thing he does when he wants something to sound like a joke but means every word of it. "She is too busy being important. Honestly, I think she just likes being needed. Gives her something to do since she is not exactly building a life over there." My mother made a sound I recognized immediately, the warm, easy laugh she makes when she agrees with something, but does not want to say it directly. And then she said just quietly enough that it was clearly not meant for me, that I should honestly be grateful the family still had enough going on to keep me involved. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after that message ended. The leftovers I had been about to reheat were still sitting on the counter. My coffee had gone cold, and I noticed with a kind of detached clarity that I was not crying. I was not even angry yet. I was just sitting very still, watching something rearrange itself inside me into a shape that felt permanent and specific and not at all like the shape it had been 30 minutes earlier. I want to be honest about something because I think this part matters. I was not completely blind to the imbalance. There had been small moments, small signals, small things I had noticed and filed away without fully letting myself read them. The Christmas nobody asked what I wanted because the assumption was I would just be happy helping coordinate the meal. The birthday where my mother mentioned how lucky I was not to have a mortgage of my own yet, as though my rent and my family contributions and my thin savings account were not filling up the same space. I had noticed those things. I had chosen, deliberately, to give them the most generous possible interpretation every single time, because the alternative was to look directly at what they actually meant, and I was not ready to do that. The voice message simply made it impossible to keep not being ready. I did not call anyone. I did not text anyone. I went back through 6 years of bank transfers and payment receipts, organized by person and by date, the way you organize anything when you want the truth to be undeniable. The total, when I finally added it up, was large enough that I sat with it for a full minute before I moved on to the next thing on my list. What hit me harder than the number was the accounting of time running underneath it. 6 years of overtime I had never pushed back on because I needed the income to stay stable. 6 years of trips I had postponed, and purchases I had talked myself out of, and conversations I had avoided because keeping the peace had seemed more important than keeping score. It had not occurred to me until that moment that protecting everyone else from discomfort had been quietly costing me my own. My parents had a large anniversary dinner coming up, their 38th, already planned at a restaurant my father had booked 2 months earlier. The whole family invited, extended relatives included, the kind of gathering where everyone naturally expected me to make the reservation confirm, handle the group card, and probably give a toast. The exact setting where, 6 years earlier, this version of me had first been quietly decided on, without my knowledge or consent. I spent a weekend thinking carefully about what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it. I drafted 4 letters, one for each family member, written the same way I write any difficult professional communication. Clear, factual, warm where warmth was genuine, and completely free of performance. Each letter listed what I had quietly contributed over 6 years, with dates. Each one ended with a clear and specific final date when the voluntary support would stop, and a note that I hoped that we could all adjust accordingly with enough time to plan. I did not use a single word designed to wound anyone. I did not need to. The facts, laid out plainly, were already doing everything I needed them to do. The restaurant was full and warm when I arrived. My mother was already glowing at the head of the table in a dress she had let slip cost more than her last 3 grocery runs combined, surrounded by aunts and cousins and the easy laughter of people who had not once in 6 years thought to ask how any of it kept getting paid for. My father caught my eye when I walked in and smiled the way he always does, the smile that has always meant I love you without requiring anything as specific as the words. When the dinner plates were cleared and someone tapped a glass for toasts, my mother looked directly at me and said, loud enough for the whole table, that Layla would say something because Layla was always so good at knowing the right words for every occasion. I stood up. I had the envelopes with me. I thanked my parents sincerely and completely for 38 years of building a family, and I meant it, every syllable of it, without irony or agenda. And then I placed the first envelope in front of my mother and explained quietly that inside was a complete record of the support I had provided over the past 6 years, along with a clear date when that support would be ending, so she and my father had time to plan. I walked around the table and placed Derek's envelope in front of him and Priya's in front of her and said the same thing to each of them, that there was nothing inside but the truth, carefully recorded, offered without drama, and final. The table went very, very quiet. Not the polite quiet before a toast, a different kind of quiet entirely. Derek opened his envelope and read it with his jaw tightening in a way I recognized from every argument we had ever had where he knew he was wrong and refused to say so. Priya read hers and looked up at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before, something between shock and something softer underneath it that I could not quite name. My mother stood up fast enough that her chair moved and told me in a voice that was still trying to be controlled that I had just humiliated her at her own anniversary dinner in front of everyone she loved. I waited until she was completely finished, and then I told her, gently and without any performance at all, that I was not asking for an apology, that I was simply making sure the record was accurate before the arrangements changed, that I loved her and I was glad I had been able to help when it mattered. and that I hoped the rest of the evening was everything she had wanted it to be. I picked up my coat. My cousin Sarah, 21 years old, and the only person at that table who had ever once sent me a message just to ask how I was doing without needing something attached to it, caught me at the door. She hugged me tightly and said she saw me, that she had always seen me, and that she was proud of me for finally letting myself be seen. I held that sentence in my chest the entire drive home, and I have not let it go since. The weeks after that were exactly as complicated as I expected and exactly as clarifying. My mother called her bank the following Monday to renegotiate her own accounts independently for the first time in years. Derek picked up weekend work he had been turning down for 2 years because the math finally required it. Priya called me, not to ask for anything, but to talk. And somewhere in the middle of that conversation, she said she was sorry in a way that sounded like she actually meant it, quietly and without defensiveness. And that meant more to me than every explanation I had never received. Some relatives who had not been in that room took my mother's version of events as gospel, as they always do. The ones who had been there and read the numbers with their own eyes went noticeably gentler in how they spoke to me afterward, the way people do when they have been quietly recalibrating something and are not quite ready to admit it out loud. I did not defend myself to a single person. The letters had already said everything, and facts have never once needed me to follow them around the room and argue on their behalf. My life since then has gotten quieter, and underneath the quiet, genuinely fuller. I took a long weekend by myself at a small bed and breakfast 2 hours from home. I did not bring my laptop. I read a book I had been meaning to read for 2 years and sat by a window and drank good coffee and did not check my phone until I felt like it. It sounds like nothing, and it was actually enormous. Sarah calls me now the way a person calls someone they actually want to talk to, not someone they are managing. And that distinction, small as it might sound to anyone else, has become the clearest possible definition I have ever found for what love is actually supposed to feel like. If you have ever been the dependable one, the one everyone called when things fell apart and nobody called just to ask if you were doing all right, I want you to hear this. Generosity given freely is a gift. Generosity taken silently for granted until it becomes invisible is something else entirely, and you are allowed to name that difference out loud. The people in your life who genuinely value you will not disappear when you finally do. The ones who only valued what you were covering will make that clear immediately, and honestly, that clarity is its own kind of gift, even when it does not feel like one at the time. Drop a comment and tell me if you have ever been the one everyone leaned on, but nobody thought to check on. Subscribe so the next story finds you at exactly the moment you need it most.